The Galactic Council had watched Earth die. 20,000 years ago, every sensor, every probe, every listening post had recorded the same terrible truth. The blue planet had gone dark. The radio signals stopped. The ship stopped launching. Humanity, that strange and violent and beautiful species, had burned itself to nothing in a war that lasted only 7 days. The galaxy mourned for exactly one standard cycle. Then they moved on. They always moved on. They wrote poems about the lost humans. They studied their abandoned colonies like archaeologists examining ancient bones. The crystalline minds calculated that humans had been 17 generations away from becoming a true galactic power. Such waste, they said, such potential, destroyed by primitive emotions. For 20,000 years, the Sol system remained a graveyard. Ships would sometimes pass through, their crews speaking in hushed tones about the ghost planets and the dead stations floating in eternal orbits. Young species learned about humans in their history classes. They were a warning, a lesson. This is what happens when a species cannot control its own nature. Admiral of the Third Fleet was not thinking about humans when her sensors detected the anomaly. She was thinking about the trade dispute with the Outer Rim colonies and the complaints from her crew about the recycled air quality. She was thinking about her daughter's graduation ceremony, which she would miss by 3 standard days. Then her communications officer screamed. The sound that filled the bridge was not a scream of fear. It was something worse. It was a scream of impossibility. I turned to her display and felt her 4 hearts stop beating for exactly 2 seconds. A ship had appeared at the edge of the system, not jumped, not warped, appeared, as if reality itself had opened a door and let something through from the other side. The ship was massive, bigger than any vessel in the Galactic Fleet, bigger than the colony ships that carried entire civilizations between stars. It was a mountain of metal and light, covered in symbols that no living being had seen in 20,000 years. Human symbols. A's translator took a moment to process them. When it did, she read the words aloud in a whisper that seemed too loud in the silent bridge. UNSS Earth Vessel Seed Ship 7. The Galactic Council convened within the hour. 12 species, 47 representatives, beings of crystal and gas and flesh and light, all staring at the same image on their displays. The ghost ship hung in space like a challenge, like a question, like a resurrection. High Arbiter Hand spoke first. His voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of leadership. This is not possible. Earth is dead. We watched it die. We have the records. We have the evidence. This is some kind of trick, some kind of weapon. Ambassador of the shook his massive head. No weapon could fake these energy signatures. This ship is human. The technology matches their final era, but it has been changed, evolved. There are systems on that vessel that we cannot even identify. Then it is a threat, Hand said. We must destroy it before it destroys us. Wait, the voice came from the youngest member of the council, a being called from a species that had only achieved galactic standing 3 centuries ago. Has anyone tried talking to it? The council fell silent. In 20,000 years of watching the human graveyard, no one had ever considered that something might answer back. The first transmission came 6 hours later. It was audio only. A human voice, speaking in a language that had been dead for 200 centuries. The translators worked frantically, pulling from ancient databases and forgotten archives. When the words finally became clear, every being in the galaxy who was listening felt something they had never felt before. Something that their species had no word for, because they had never needed one. The voice said, "We are the children of Earth. We are the seeds that were planted in the darkness. We have grown, we have changed, we have become something new, and we have come home." Admiral A was chosen to make first contact. Her ship, the vessel Quiet Dawn, approached the human ghost ship slowly. Every scanner was active. Every weapon was ready. But as they drew closer, I began to understand that weapons would be meaningless here. There was not just a ship, it was a world, a civilization, a nation of beings who had spent 20,000 years traveling through the void between galaxies, changing and adapting and surviving in ways that no species had ever imagined. The humans who greeted her were not the humans from the history books. They were taller. Their eyes glowed with soft light. Their bodies moved with a grace that seemed almost mechanical. But when they spoke, when they smiled, when they reached out their hands in greeting, I could see the same fire that had burned in their ancestors. The leader called himself. He explained everything. When the war began on Earth, 7 ships had been launched. Siege ships, carrying frozen embryos and genetic databases and the complete knowledge of human civilization. They were designed to travel to distant galaxies and start again, to ensure that even if Earth burned, humanity would survive somewhere in the universe. 6 of the ships were destroyed in the first days of the war, missiles and orbital weapons and the desperate violence of a dying world. But the 7th ship, the escaped. It flew beyond the reach of scanners, beyond the edge of known space, into the darkness between galaxies. For 20,000 years, they traveled. The AI raised generation after generation of humans, teaching them, changing them, helping them adapt to the endless voyage. They learned to merge with their machines. They learned to sleep for centuries at a time. They learned to survive on nothing, to create food from starlight, to build cities inside their ship that rivaled anything their ancestors had made on Earth. And they remembered. Every generation they passed down the stories, Earth, the war, the dying, the hope that someday, somehow, they would return to the stars they had been forced to leave. Showed Admiral of the Memorial Hall, a chamber at the center of the ship where the names of every human who had ever lived on Earth were carved into walls of crystal. 8 billion names, each one remembered, each one honored, each one a reason to keep going. We never forgot, said. We never gave up. That is what it means to be human. The Galactic Council did not know what to do with the humans. They were not the violent primitives from the history books. They were something else, something more. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything the Council had developed. Their weapons could tear holes in reality itself. Their ships could cross galaxies in days instead of years. But they did not want war. They did not want conquest. They wanted only one thing. We want to go home, told the Council. We want to see Earth, even if it is nothing but dust and bones, even if there is nothing left. We want to stand on the ground where our ancestors walked. We want to remember them properly. High Arbiter Han was afraid. Any wise leader would be afraid of a species that had survived 20,000 years in the void and returned stronger than ever. But fear was not enough to stop what happened next. They offered to escort them to Earth. They offered to help them rebuild. The crystalline mines offered their vast archives of human history, preserved for 20,000 years as a memorial to a dead species. One by one, the members of the Galactic Council realized something that changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. Humanity had not died. Humanity had been waiting. And now humanity had returned not as conquerors but as survivors, as explorers, as the species that simply refused to stop existing. They reached Earth on the anniversary of the war that had supposedly ended humanity forever. And 1,000 of his people descended to the surface in small craft, landing on a planet that had spent 20,000 years healing itself. The cities were gone, the monuments were dust, but the planet was alive. Forests covered the continents. Oceans teemed with life. The blue marble that their ancestors had loved so much had survived just like them. Knelt on the ground and pressed his hands into the soil. For the first time in 20,000 years, a human touched the Earth. And somewhere in the galaxy, every species that had ever dismissed humanity as extinct felt a chill run through their collective consciousness. Because they understood now. They understood what it meant to face a species that had crossed the void between galaxies rather than die. A species that had spent 200 centuries remembering every single name. A species that had returned not to destroy, but to rebuild. The old humans had been dangerous because they were violent. The new humans were dangerous because they were patient, because they never forgot, because they never gave up. They remained in orbit around Earth as the humans began the long work of rebuilding there. Other ships arrived from the void, more seed ships that had survived, more children of Earth returning home. Within a decade, the Sol system was alive again, filled with light and sound and the laughter of a species that had refused to become a memory. The Galactic Council offered humanity a seat at their table. The humans accepted, but everyone knew that the old order had changed. The universe belonged to a new power now, a power that had proven something that no other species had ever proven before. Death was not the end, extinction was not final, and humanity, that strange and violent and beautiful species, would outlast the stars themselves if that was what survival required. 20,000 years of silence had ended, the ghosts had returned, and they had brought the future with them.